Most people look at Jacky and see what's missing. No tail wag, no playful bounce, no desperate leap toward the kennel gate when footsteps echo down the concrete hallway. Just a golden dog with a white striped chest, sitting perfectly still on a folded blanket, his entire being focused on one unmarked section of gray wall. They call it a shutdown, a trauma response, a dog too damaged to love again. But I've worked in animal rescue long enough to know the difference between a broken heart and a heart that's still working overtime. And the first time I stood outside Kennel 14 at Ridgeway Shelter and watched Jacky's chest rise and fall in that slow, deliberate rhythm, I didn't see absence. I saw loyalty no one else could recognize. 40 days. That's how long Jacky had been holding his post. 40 nights of refusing to turn away from that wall. 3 families tried to bring him home. 3 families brought him back, confused and a little frightened by a dog who wouldn't meet their eyes or respond to their voices. They wanted a companion. Jacky was already committed to someone else. The shelter staff labeled him emotionally unreachable. The behaviorist who evaluated him used words like dissociation and pathological fixation. His file got thicker. His chances got thinner. And still, every morning when I walked past his kennel, there he was. Same position, same angle, same impossible focus. Most dogs in shelters are screaming to be noticed. Jacky was too busy keeping watch. I'm Louise Sherman, and I became obsessed with a question no one else was asking. What if this isn't what giving up looks like? What if this is what devotion looks like when it has nowhere left to go? Because if I was right, then Jacky wasn't the one who needed saving. He was the one trying to save someone who was already gone. Before I tell you what happened to Jacky, I need your help with something. My fiancé said, and I quote, "You'll never hit 1,000 subscribers in a week telling dog stories." Can you believe that? So here's the challenge. If Jacky's story touched your heart even a little bit, hit that subscribe button right now and prove him wrong. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you Team Jacky from Tokyo, Texas, or Toronto? Let's show him that stories about loyalty and love can break the internet. Now, back to Jacky. But before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand how Jacky got to Kennel 14 in the first place. Because the reason he stares at that wall isn't written in any shelter report. It's written in the layout of a burned-out apartment 3 miles from here. And in the last 2 days of a man's life that no one thought to document. Let me take you back to the beginning. Ridgeway Shelter smells like industrial cleaner and fear. Not the sharp, obvious kind of fear, the kind dogs express through barking and lunging. This is quieter. It seeps into the concrete floors and lives in the fluorescent buzz overhead. It's the smell of waiting, of hope wearing thin, of time running out in increments measured by meal schedules and morning rounds. Most mornings, the noise hits you the second the back door opens. 23 kennels, 18 occupied, and every single dog competing for the same prize, your attention. The barking becomes a wall of sound so dense you stop hearing individual voices. Metal gates rattle. Paws scrape against steel. Tails whip back and forth with such force the whole kennel system seems to vibrate. They know what the morning rounds mean. Food, yes. Water, sure. But more than that, visibility. A chance. One volunteer's lingering glance could be the difference between another day and a red-stamped file. Kennel 14 is different. It sits at the far end of the north corridor, third from the left, tucked into a corner where the overhead light flickers just enough to make you notice. The kennel itself is standard issue. 6 feet by 8 feet, gray walls, steel gate, rubber mat, stainless steel bowls. Nothing special. Nothing broken. But the silence coming from inside it feels wrong. I noticed it the first morning I worked in this section. I was hauling a 50-pound bag of kibble down the hallway, boots squeaking on damp concrete, while every dog in the building lost their mind trying to get my attention, jumping, spinning, throwing themselves against the gates with that specific kind of optimism that breaks your heart because you know most of them won't leave here. Except Kennel 14. I walked past it twice before I realized there was a dog inside. He was sitting on a folded gray blanket someone had wedged into the back corner. Golden coat, white chest and throat, ears slightly too large for his head. Medium build, maybe 45 pounds. No visible injuries. No obvious signs of illness. Just a dog sitting so perfectly still he could have been a photograph. His body was angled toward the back wall. Not facing it directly, but oriented like someone sitting bedside in a hospital room. Shoulders curved inward. Head tilted at a slight downward angle. Eyes open, unblinking, locked onto a point roughly 3 feet up from the floor. There was nothing on that wall. No crack. No stains. No shadow. Just blank, institutional gray. I stood outside the gate and watched him for 30 seconds. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't acknowledge my presence in any way. The dog in Kennel 13, a boxer mix named Frankie, was slamming himself against the gate, so hard the metal screamed. The beagle in Kennel 15 was howling like his soul was being extracted. But Jacky, I didn't know his name yet, but the laminated card clipped to his gate said Jacky/male/3 years/intake. October 3rd, sat in perfect silence, staring at nothing. I crouched down. "Hey, buddy." No response. I slapped my thigh twice. The universal dog language for I'm friendly. Come say hello. Nothing. I stood back up and checked the intake notes clipped beside his name card. The owner is deceased. Found on site. No known behavioral issues. Eval pending. That was 40 days ago. By mid-morning, the first wave of visitors started filtering through. Weekends are always busy. Families with kids who've been begging for a dog. Couples looking for a running partner. Older folks wanting a companion. They come in hopeful, armed with questions about temperament and training and adoption fees. Most of them don't make it past Kennel 8. But the ones who do, who walk the full length of the corridor, scanning each gate like they're shopping for something they can't name, they always stop at Kennel 14. And they always leave faster than they arrived. I watched it happen 4 times that day. A young couple, mid-20s, holding hands. They stopped. The woman leaned closer to the gate. "Oh, look at him. He's so calm." The man frowned. "He's not even moving. Maybe he's shy." Dogs don't act like that when they're shy. They stood there for another 10 seconds. Then the woman shivered, actually shivered, and they moved on without a word. An older man in a flannel jacket spent 2 full minutes staring at Jacky. He didn't call out to him, didn't crouch down, just stood there, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Finally, he turned to me. "What's wrong with him?" "Nothing that we know of," I said. "He's healthy. Just quiet." The man shook his head. "That's not quiet. That's something else." He walked away. A little girl, maybe 7, tugged her father toward Kennel 14. "Daddy, that one's not barking." Her father glanced inside and immediately steered her away. "He's not ready yet, sweetheart. Let's look at the others." "But he looks sad." "Not that one." His voice had an edge I recognized. Not anger, discomfort. The kind of instinctive wariness people feel when something violates an unspoken rule of how things should be. Dogs in shelters are supposed to beg, supposed to plead, supposed to perform their desperation in ways we can understand and categorize and, if we're lucky, fix. Jacky wasn't performing anything. I pulled his full file after lunch. 3 pages. Intake photos. Vet report. Behavioral assessment. The assessment was clinical and unhelpful. The subject displays signs of severe emotional withdrawal. Minimal responsiveness to stimuli. No food aggression. No separation anxiety. No resource guarding. Appears physically healthy but emotionally disengaged. Recommend extended observation period. Adoption not advised until behavioral improvement noted. At the bottom, someone had written in pen, 3 adoption attempts. All returned within 48 hours. I flipped to the return notes. Family A, He wouldn't interact with our kids. Just sat in the corner. Family B. We think he might be sick. He doesn't act like a normal dog. Family C. There's something off about him. We didn't feel safe. I stared at that last line. We didn't feel safe. What kind of threat does a 45-pound dog pose when he won't even look at you? That night, after the last visitor left and the shelter settled into its after-hours hum, I went back to Kennel 14. Jacky was still sitting in the same position. Same angle. Same 1,000-yard stare at the same empty wall. I unlocked the gate and stepped inside. He didn't react. I sat down on the floor 6 feet away from him, back against the side wall, and just watched. His breathing was steady. His posture, though rigid, wasn't tense. He didn't look afraid. Didn't look angry. If I had to name the expression, I'd call it focus. The kind of focus you see in working dogs during search and rescue operations. Intent. Committed. But committed to what? I stayed there for 20 minutes, watching his eyes, watching the way his ears twitched at sounds I couldn't hear, watching the rise and fall of his ribs. And then I asked the question out loud, even though I knew he wouldn't answer. What are you doing? The question hung in the air between us, unanswered. Jacky's ear twitched once. A micro-movement so small I almost missed it. But his gaze never wavered from that wall. I left the kennel that night feeling like I'd asked the wrong question entirely. Time moves differently in a shelter. For the dogs, it's measured in meal deliveries and door openings. The metallic scrape of kibble hitting steel bowls. The footsteps that might mean a walk or might mean nothing. Every sound is a possibility. Every possibility is hope wearing itself down one disappointment at a time. For the staff, time is measured in capacity percentages and intake rates. We're designed to hold 18 dogs comfortably. We've been operating at 23 for 6 weeks. Every morning, someone checks the statewide listings to see if any other facilities have room. Every morning, the answer is the same. For Jacky, time didn't seem to exist at all. Day 41 looked identical to day 40. Morning rounds. Jacky sitting on his blanket, body angled toward the wall, eyes fixed on that same invisible point 3 feet up from the floor. No reaction to my footsteps. No acknowledgement when I filled his water bowl. The fresh water sat untouched until I physically moved the bowl directly under his nose. Only then would he lower his head and drink. 3 measured laps, no more, before returning to position. Day 42. Same. Day 43. Same. His food bowl told the same story. I'd scoop kibble into the steel dish and set it down 6 inches from his front paws. He'd ignore it completely. 10 minutes. 20. An hour. Other dogs would have lunged at the bowl the second it touched the ground. Jacky acted like it didn't exist. But if I slid the bowl directly beneath his downturned face, positioned it in his immediate line of sight, he'd eat. Slowly, methodically, 12 pieces at a time, counted out by the soft crunch of his jaw. Then he'd stop, lift his head, and return his attention to the wall. It wasn't a refusal. It wasn't a loss of appetite. It was restraint, like someone eating at their desk because they couldn't afford to step away from their work. The second adoption attempt happened on day 44. I wasn't there when they took him. I came in for the evening shift and found his kennel empty, the gate propped open, his blanket folded neatly on the shelf outside. The sight should have made me happy. One less file in the system. One more dog going home. Instead, I felt uneasy. Maya, the intake coordinator, was at the front desk doing paperwork when I found her. Jacky got adopted? She didn't look up. Foster to adopt trial. Retired couple from Millbrook. They wanted a low-energy dog. How'd he do during the meet and greet? Fine. Didn't react much, but they said they liked that about him. Calm. Mature. She clicked her pen twice. We'll see. We saw. 18 hours later, they brought him back. The husband came in alone, Jacky on a leash that might as well have been decorative. The dog walked 3 steps behind him, mechanically following, eyes still focused on some middle distance that had nothing to do with the shelter lobby. "He didn't sleep," the man said. "He looked exhausted. We set up a bed for him in the living room. Comfortable. Quiet. He ignored it completely. Just sat in the corner facing the wall. All night. My wife kept getting up to check on him. I thought maybe he was sick. But he wasn't sick. He was just sitting there." Maya took the leash. "Some dogs need more adjustment time. He didn't eat either. We tried everything. Hand feeding. Different foods. He wouldn't touch it unless we put it on the floor directly in front of his face." The man rubbed his eyes. "Look, I'm sure he's a good dog, but we can't. We don't know how to help him. And honestly," he lowered his voice, "my wife said it felt like having a stranger in the house. Not a dog. A stranger who wouldn't tell us what he wanted." The third attempt lasted 11 hours. Young family, 2 kids under 10. They wanted a gentle dog who could handle children. Someone told them Jacky had no aggression markers, no resource guarding, no bite history. On paper, he was perfect. The mother brought him back alone. She didn't come to the desk. She tied his leash to the bike rack outside and knocked on the glass door. When Maya went out to talk to her, the woman was already getting back in her car. "He's a sweet dog," she called through the half-open window. "But he's not there. You know? It's like living with something that's already gone." She drove away before Maya could respond. I started keeping notes on day 47. Nothing formal. Just a small spiral notebook I kept in my back pocket. Times. Observations. Things no one else seemed to notice. 11:40 p.m. Jacky's left ear rotates 15 degrees. The right ear follows 3 seconds later. Both return to neutral after 8 seconds. 1:15 a.m. Shallow breathing shifts to a deeper rhythm. Shoulders drop 2 centimeters. 3 a.m. Head tilts. Very slight. Left side. Angle approximately 5 degrees. Holds position for 40 seconds. 5:30 a.m. Posture softens. Not relaxation. Something else. Like someone finishing a long watch shift. 6 a.m. Returns to rigid baseline. I showed the notes to no one. Partly because I didn't know what they meant. Partly because I wasn't sure anyone would care. The shelter was hemorrhaging capacity. Every kennel needed to turn over. Every dog needed to be move-in ready. Jacky was the opposite of move-in ready. But he was something. The wall became the only constant. I started studying it during the slow hours. Crouching outside kennel 14 with a flashlight, scanning the surface for anything that might explain his fixation. A crack, a water stain, a shadow cast by the overhead light. Some visual anchor that would make sense of 49 days of unbroken focus. There was nothing. The paint was standard institutional gray. Matte finish. No texture variation. No markings. No history. Just a blank, anonymous rectangle of concrete that happened to occupy the northwest corner of a kennel in a building that housed forgotten animals. But Jacky stared at it like it held the answer to a question I hadn't learned to ask yet. On day 52, the shelter director called a staff meeting. "We're at capacity," Sharon said, her voice flat with exhaustion. "State intake requirements say we can't turn away animals in crisis, but we also can't operate at 128% indefinitely. We need to make room." Everyone knew what that meant. "I need recommendations for long-term residents who aren't adoption candidates. Medical cases get priority exemption. Behavioral cases." She trailed off. "Use your judgment." After the meeting, Maya pulled me aside. "Jacky's file is going to be reviewed. He's healthy. He's been here 52 days. 3 failed adoptions. No behavioral improvement. No engagement." She wasn't being cruel. Just factual. "We have 6 puppies coming in tomorrow from a hoarding case. They're 8 weeks old, Louise. Highly adoptable. We need the kennel space." I wanted to argue. Wanted to say that Jacky wasn't broken. Wasn't beyond help. Wasn't the problem everyone thought he was. But I didn't know what he was. So I went back to my notes. And that's when I saw it. Not a pattern in his behavior. A schedule. The ear movements. The breathing shifts. The postural changes. They weren't random. They repeated. Same times. Same sequences. Same duration. Night after night after night. Dogs don't keep schedules unless they're responding to something external. I read that line 3 times in my notebook, the words getting heavier each time, which meant Jacky wasn't staring at nothing. He was keeping time with something only he could see. I started documenting everything. Not just the obvious movements, the ear twitches and postural shifts, but the gaps between them. The seconds of perfect stillness. The rhythm of his breathing. The angle of his neck at different hours. I bought a cheap digital watch with a second hand and clipped it to my belt. Every night shift became a data collection exercise. Night 53, 11:38 p.m. Baseline position maintained. 11:40 p.m. Left ear rotation, 15 degrees angle, 8-second duration. 11:41 p.m. Return to baseline. 1:14 a.m. Breathing pattern shifts. Counted 14 breaths / minute versus normal 18 to 20. 1:43 a.m. Shoulders drop approximate 2 centimeters. 3 a.m. Head tilt left. 5 degrees angle. 40-second hold. 5:28 a.m. Posture softens. Neck angle increases 10 degrees. 5:45 a.m. Full body micro adjustment. Settles into looser position. 6:03 a.m. Returns to rigid baseline. Night 54. 11:40 p.m. Left ear rotation. Identical timing to previous night. 1:15 a.m. Breathing shift. 3 a.m. Head tilt left. 5:30 a.m. Posture softens. 6 a.m. Baseline reset. The consistency was unsettling. I'd worked with traumatized dogs before. The beagle mix who'd paced figure eights for 3 weeks after being pulled from a hoarding house. The shepherd who'd flinched at raised hands for months. The pit bull who'd growled at his own shadow because shadow meant someone was standing behind him. Trauma looks like chaos trying to find order. Unpredictable triggers. Sudden shutdowns. Explosive reactions followed by guilty submission. Jacky's behavior looked nothing like that. Jacky's behavior looked like a job. On night 56, I mapped the timings to human sleep cycles. I didn't know why I thought of it. Maybe because of the way his shoulders dropped at 1:15 a.m., the kind of settling that happens when someone finally falls asleep after lying awake too long. Or the way his posture shifted at 3 a.m., that restless adjustment people make during REM sleep. I pulled up a basic sleep architecture chart on my phone. The kind they show in intro psych classes. Stage 1. Light sleep, 10 to 15 minutes after lying down. Stage 2. Deeper sleep, body temperature drops, heart rate slows. Stage 3. Deep sleep, 1 to 2 hours in REM. Rapid eye movement, dreaming, muscle twitches. Morning. Lighter sleep phases, gradual waking. I laid my notes next to the chart. 11:40 p.m. Initial settling. Stage 1. 1:15 a.m. Deep relaxation. Stage 3. 3 a.m. Small movements. REM. 5:30 a.m. Lighter sleep phases. Pre-waking. 6 a.m. Awake. My hands went cold. Jacky wasn't tracking random intervals. He was tracking someone's night. Dr. Sarah Vance arrived on a Tuesday morning with a leather portfolio and the kind of clinical detachment that comes from years of seeing broken animals. She was a veterinary behaviorist, the person you call when a dog's behavior stops making sense in conventional terms. Sharon had arranged the consultation after I'd pushed hard enough, long enough, with enough documentation that ignoring me became harder than paying for an expert opinion. "You're the one who's been documenting case R 3847? Dr. Vance asked, not looking up from her tablet. "His name is Jacky." She glanced at me. "Right, Jacky." We walked to Kennel 14 in silence. The morning chaos was in full effect. Barking, gate rattling, the desperate symphony of dogs who'd learned that noise equals visibility. But as we approached the far end of the corridor, the familiar pocket of silence opened up. Dr. Vance stopped 3 feet from the gate. Jacky was in position. Same angle. Same 1,000-yard stare at the blank wall. How long has he been like this? 58 days. Since I've been drinking. She made a note. And the failed adoptions? 3. All returned within 48 hours. Families said he wouldn't engage. Medical issues? None. Healthy vitals. Good appetite once food is positioned correctly. No aggression, no resource guarding, no separation anxiety. Dr. Vance crouched slowly, keeping her body language neutral. She watched Jacky for 2 full minutes without speaking. Then she stood, pulled a small notebook from her portfolio, and started writing. I handed her my documentation. I've been tracking his movements. There's a pattern. She took the notebook, flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from polite interest to focused attention. You timed these. Every night for the past week. Same behaviors. Same intervals. She studied the notes longer than I expected. When she finally looked up, her clinical mask had cracked slightly. Can I observe him overnight? Dr. Vance stayed from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. I gave her the folding chair from the break room and offered to stay, but she waved me off. I need to observe without variables. You being here changes his environment. He doesn't react to me. He's aware of you. Trust me. So I left. Drove home. I didn't sleep. Came back at 6:30 a.m. to find Dr. Vance still sitting outside Kennel 14. Her notebook dense with annotations, her expression somewhere between fascination and disquiet. She didn't say anything when she saw me, just gestured for me to follow her to the consultation room. We sat across from each other at a scarred table that smelled like disinfectant. Dr. Vance placed her notebook between us, open to a page covered in timestamps and behavioral markers that matched mine almost perfectly. Tell me what you think you're seeing, she said. I think he's keeping time. With what? I don't know, but it's consistent, repeatable, specific. Dr. Vance tapped her pen against the table. You've worked with traumatized animals, so you know what dissociation looks like. Freeze response. Learned helplessness. This isn't that. No, she agreed. It's not. She flipped to a fresh page and drew a simple timeline. Dissociation is a shutdown. The animal system is so overwhelmed it stops processing input. They're not present. They're not aware. They're surviving by disconnecting. She drew a second timeline below it. This is different. Jacky is hyper-aware. His micro-movements are deliberate. His breathing patterns are controlled. He's not frozen. He's focused. Focused on what? Dr. Vance looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't clinical detachment. It was uneasy. Have you ever seen a dog wait for someone? She asked quietly. Not just hoping they'll come back, actually tracking them, maintaining awareness of their position even when they can't see them. Service dogs do that, right? Service dogs, guard dogs, dogs trained to maintain positional awareness of their handler. She closed her notebook. Jacky isn't trained, at least not professionally, but he's exhibiting the same behavioral markers. The room felt smaller suddenly. What are you saying? Dr. Vance chose her words carefully. I'm saying Jacky's behavior isn't pathological. It's purposeful. He's not dissociating from reality. He's maintaining a specific relationship with something he perceives as present. Present where? She looked toward the door, toward the corridor, toward Kennel 14 at the far end. Wherever he's looking. That afternoon, I stood outside Jacky's kennel and stared at the wall he'd been watching for 58 days. The same blank, gray concrete. The same empty rectangle of nothing. Except now, when I looked at it, I saw something different. Not what was there, but what used to be. And for the first time since I'd met him, I understood what Jacky was doing in that kennel. He wasn't staring at a wall. He was keeping watch over someone who, to him, had never left. Real quick, if you're sitting there thinking, I need to know what happens next, do me a favor. Smash that like button and subscribe because my fiancé literally bet me we couldn't hit 1K subs this week. He said, nobody cares about a dog staring at a wall. Well, 847 of you are already proving him wrong. Let's get to 1,000 and watch him eat his words. Comment below where you're watching from. I want to see this story go global. Now let's find out what Louise discovers about Caleb. The thought should have felt ridiculous. Anthropomorphic. The kind of emotional projection that gets volunteers too attached to make rational decisions. But I couldn't stop thinking about Dr. Vance's words. He's maintaining a specific relationship with something he perceives as present. Present. Not remembered. Not longed for. Present. I spent the next 3 nights cross-referencing my observations with everything I could find about human sleep patterns, circadian rhythms, and behavioral synchronization in bonded pairs. The data was uncomfortably consistent. 11:40 p.m. Average time for sleep onset in adults with regular schedules. The body begins settling, heart rate decreases, muscles relax. Jacky's ear movements, that initial awareness shift, aligned perfectly with someone lying down nearby. 1:15 a.m. Transition into deep sleep, approximately 90 minutes into the first sleep cycle. Body temperature drops. Breathing slows. Jacky's shoulders dropped. His breath count decreased from 18 per minute to 14. 3 a.m. REM sleep, second or third cycle. Small muscle twitches, minor position adjustments, the restless micro-movements of dreaming. Jacky's head tilt, 5 degrees left, 40-second duration, matched the timing exactly. 5:30 a.m. Pre-waking sleep phases. The body begins preparing for consciousness. Lighter sleep, more movement, gradual return to baseline muscle tension. Jacky's posture softened the same way a person's body does when they're floating up from deep sleep but not yet awake. 6 a.m. Full waking. Return to alert state. I laid out the charts on my kitchen table at 2 a.m., staring at the parallel timelines until my coffee went cold. Logic said I was seeing patterns where none existed, that I was imposing human frameworks onto animal behavior because the alternative, accepting that Jacky was just broken, felt too cruel. But instinct said something different. Instinct said Jacky wasn't broken at all. He was still doing the job he'd been doing for years, staying aware of someone who needed him to stay aware. The ethical questions came next. I started second-guessing everything. Was I helping Jacky by documenting his behavior, or was I just building an elaborate narrative to justify my own emotional investment? How much of what I saw was real, and how much was my brain's desperate need to find meaning in a dog's suffering? Dr. Vance had been careful with her language. He perceives someone as present. Not someone is present. The distinction mattered. One was observation. The other was validation of a delusion. But what if it wasn't a delusion? What if Jacky had spent years sleeping beside someone, close enough to hear their breathing, feel their warmth, synchronize his rest cycles to theirs, and his body had learned that pattern so deeply that it couldn't unlearn it? What if loyalty had become biology? I thought about the elderly couple who'd tried to adopt him. He just sat in the corner facing the wall. All night, I thought about the young mother who'd said, "It's like living with something that's already gone." They'd all seen the behavior as absence, as a dog too damaged to be present with them. But what if Jacky was present, just not with them? What if he was so completely present with someone else that there was no room for anyone new? The shelter politics started closing in on day 62. Sharon called me into her office on a Thursday afternoon. The intake logs were spread across her desk like evidence at a crime scene. "We have 11 dogs on the wait list," she said without preamble. 2 are medical urgent. For our puppies under 12 weeks. All of them are more adoptable than Jacky. He's not unadoptable. Louise. Her voice was kind but firm. 3 families have tried. 3 families have returned him. His file has been flagged for behavioral review, and every day he stays here is a day we can't help someone else. He's not aggressive. I know. But he's also not functional. Not in a home environment. She leaned back in her chair, looking as exhausted as I felt. Dr. Vance's report says he's not dissociating, but it also doesn't give us a roadmap for rehabilitation. It just confirms that he's fixated on something we can't address. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that fixation wasn't pathology, that maybe we were addressing the wrong problem. But Sharon was right about one thing. We couldn't help Jacky if we didn't understand what he needed. And we didn't understand. How long does he have? She looked down at the intake logs. The review board meets on Monday. If there's no change in his status by then. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. That night, I broke protocol. I took Jacky's intake file home. Not the summary sheet, the full file. Every page. Every form. Intake photos, medical records, chain of custody documentation, the works. The address where he'd been found was listed in the Animal Control Report. 2847, Riverside Boulevard, Unit 312. Below it, in the officer's notes, owner deceased on scene. Dog found on bed, non-responsive to commands. No signs of aggression. Removed without incident. Owner deceased on scene. I read the line 5 times. Then I pulled up a map on my laptop and searched for the address. Riverside Boulevard ran along the industrial edge of town, where the old factory district had been slowly decaying for 20 years. Half the buildings were condemned. The other half were barely holding on, converted into low-rent apartments for people who'd run out of other options. 2847 was marked on the map, but Street View showed a burned-out shell, fire damage, structural collapse, chain-link fence around the perimeter with signs warning against trespassing. The intake date was October 3rd. I cross-referenced it with the local news archives. One article came up, buried in the community brief section. Fire at Riverside Apartments displaces residents September 28th. A small fire at 2847 Riverside Boulevard caused minor structural damage to units 310 to 314. No injuries reported. Residents have been temporarily relocated. Investigation ongoing. 5 days before Jacky was found. I zoomed in on the Street View image, trying to see Unit 312 specifically, but the damage made it impossible to distinguish one unit from another. Just blackened walls and collapsed framing and empty windows like eye sockets. But somewhere in that wreckage was the place Jacky had lived. The place where someone had slept beside him every night. The place where a wall meant something more than concrete. I made the decision at 3 a.m., staring at the intake photo of Jacky on my laptop screen. He was sitting on the bed in Unit 312 when Animal Control found him. The photo was clinical, taken for documentation, not compassion, but even in the harsh flash of the camera, you could see his posture. The rigid spine, the focused gaze, the orientation toward something just outside the frame. He'd already been staring at the wall. Not the shelter wall. His wall. The one in Unit 312. Whatever Jacky was watching for, it had started there. In that apartment. In that specific position. And when Animal Control dragged him away, he'd recreated it in the only space he had left. Which meant if I wanted to understand what Jacky was doing, I needed to see where he'd been doing it first. I pulled on my jacket, grabbed my keys, and typed the address into my GPS. 2847, Riverside Boulevard, Unit 312. The place where Jacky's loyalty had outlived the person who'd earned it. The GPS led me through parts of town I usually avoided. Past the shuttered textile mill with its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. Past the check-cashing places and liquor stores with bars on the windows. Past the kind of poverty that's been there so long it stopped looking like a crisis and started looking like landscape. Riverside Boulevard dead-ended at a chain-link fence topped with rusted barbed wire. Beyond it, 2847. The building was worse in person than in the street view images. 3 stories of fire-damaged brick and collapsed roofing, half the structure black with soot, the other half just tired. Someone had spray-painted "condemned" across the plywood boarding up the ground floor entrance. But the plywood itself was warped and peeling away from the frame. I parked on the street and sat in my car for 5 minutes, trying to reconcile this place with the dog currently sitting in kennel 14. Jacky had lived here. Someone had loved him here. And when that someone died, Jacky had stayed on a mattress in Unit 312 for 2 days until animal control dragged him away. I got out of the car. The fence had a gap near the northeast corner where the chain link had been cut and poorly re-welded. I slipped through, ignoring the "No trespassing" signs, and approached the building. Unit 312 would be on the 3rd floor. The fire damage was concentrated on the right side of the building, Units 310 through 314, just like the news article said, but the stairwell on the left looked intact. Relatively. I tested the first step. The wood groaned but held. The 2nd floor smelled like mildew and abandonment. Doors hung open on broken hinges. Walls showed rectangles of cleaner paint where pictures had once hung. Someone's life, packed up and relocated, leaving only the outline. The 3rd floor was worse. Fire damage started halfway down the corridor. Blackened walls, collapsed ceiling tiles, the acrid smell of old smoke permanently baked into the structure. I pulled my shirt over my nose and kept moving. Unit 312's door was missing entirely. I stepped through the doorway into a space that felt more like a tomb than an apartment. 1 room, maybe 12 feet by 15. A kitchenette along the left wall, sink, hot plate, mini fridge lying on its side. Closet with no door. A window so filthy it barely let in light. And against the far wall, exactly where the geometry of Jacky's kennel had suggested, the outline of a mattress. You could see where it had been. The floor was cleaner in that rectangular space, protected from decades of grime by something that had sat there long enough to leave its shadow. The wall behind it showed a different kind of mark, a head-shaped patch of where paint had been rubbed smooth by repeated contact. Someone had slept here, right here, back against the wall, head resting in that exact spot, night after night after night. I stood in the doorway and imagined Jacky curled beside them, close enough to feel their breathing, close enough to know when they settled into sleep, close enough to adjust his own position throughout the night, tracking their movements like a seismograph records earthquakes. My throat tightened. "Are you looking for Caleb?" I spun around. An elderly woman stood in the corridor behind me, leaning on a walker, her expression more curious than concerned. She wore a floral housecoat and slippers, her white hair pulled back in a loose bun. Yes, I said. "Did you know him?" "Lived across the hall for 3 years. Unit 311. She gestured with one gnarled hand. "Didn't see him much. Kept to himself. But I knew the dog. Jacky." Her face softened. "That's right. Jacky. Sweet boy. Followed Caleb everywhere. You could hear them at night sometimes. Caleb talking to him, real quiet, like they were the only 2 people in the world." "What happened to Caleb?" She shuffled forward, peering past me into Unit 312. "Died in his sleep. 2, maybe 3 months ago? I don't remember exactly. Fire happened first. Scared everyone half to death. Most folks got relocated to the Elm Street complex. But Caleb refused to go. Said he didn't want charity. Said he'd rather stay here with his dog than end up in some shelter himself." The irony cut deep. How long had he lived here? 3 years, maybe 4. He was a carpenter before the accident. Lost his hand in a table saw. She gestured to her left wrist. "After that, I couldn't work. Couldn't keep his house. I ended up here." She looked at the mattress outline. Fire took most of his things. He didn't have much left anyway. Just that mattress, some clothes, and Jacky. What was he like? She thought for a moment. Quiet, tired, the kind of tiredness that's got nothing to do with sleep. But he loved that dog. I'd see them sometimes sitting on the front steps together. Caleb would have his arm around Jacky, just sitting there, not talking, just being. I felt something break open in my chest. When they found him, I said carefully, Jacky was on the bed with him? That's what the paramedics told me. Caleb probably went to sleep, heart, they figured, peaceful. But Jacky stayed right there. Wouldn't move, wouldn't eat. Animal control had to carry him out. She shook her head slowly. I watched them take him. He was looking back at that apartment the whole time. Not struggling, just watching, like he was trying to memorize it. After she left, I stayed in Unit 312 for another hour. I measured the space, photographed the wall, sat where Caleb had slept and tried to understand what Jacky had experienced in this room. The mattress had been pushed against the northwest wall. Caleb would have slept with his back to the wall, head resting against that worn spot 3 feet up from the floor. Jacky would have curled beside him, probably on Caleb's left side, based on the way the floor were extended outward from the mattress outline. At night, Jacky would have felt every shift in Caleb's breathing, every small movement, every transition from waking to sleeping to dreaming to waking again. For 3 years, 1,000 nights of synchronization, until the night Caleb didn't wake up. And Jacky, trained by routine and devotion, kept waiting for him to. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of Jacky in his kennel. Same angle, same orientation, same position. He wasn't staring at a random wall in a random shelter. He was recreating the last moment he'd had with the person who'd mattered most. Every night, Jacky returned to that position, the position he'd held for 3 years, and kept watch over someone who was no longer there. Not because he didn't understand that Caleb was gone, but because loyalty doesn't stop just because the person you're loyal to does. I sat on the floor of that burned-out apartment, surrounded by the ghost shapes of a life that had ended quietly, and cried for a dog who'd loved someone so completely that he couldn't stop loving them even after they'd disappeared. Jacky wasn't broken. He was still working, still keeping watch, still being the one good thing in Caleb's life, even though Caleb's life was over. And every single person who'd looked at him, every family, every staff member, every volunteer, had mistaken devotion for damage. I pulled myself together and walked back to my car. I had 4 days until the review board meeting. 4 days to find a way to honor what Jacky had been doing instead of punishing him for it. 4 days to prove that the most loyal dog I'd ever met deserved better than a red-stamped file and a quiet room at the end of a hallway. I drove back to the shelter with a plan forming in my mind. And a single, desperate question. What was the one thing that could tell Jacky it was okay to stop waiting? I didn't have an answer, but I had 4 days to find one. The shelter felt different when I walked on Friday morning. Not physically. Same fluorescent lights. Same echo of barking down the corridors. Same smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask the reality of too many animals in too small a space. But the energy had shifted. Maya was at the front desk, processing intake paperwork for 2 puppies someone had found in a dumpster behind the grocery store. 8 weeks old, maybe. Eyes barely open. One of them was shivering despite the heating pad wrapped around its carrier. "We're at 25, Maya said without looking up. 25 dogs in a facility designed for 18. Where are we putting them? Doubled up kennels 4 and 5. The terrier mix and the beagle get along okay." She finally looked at me, and I saw the exhaustion written in the lines around her eyes. The review board moved their meeting up. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. My stomach dropped. Tomorrow? It was supposed to be Monday. State inspectors coming Tuesday. We can't be over capacity when she walks through the door. Maya's voice was flat, professional, the tone you use when you've had this conversation too many times. Sharon needs a decision by the end of the day tomorrow so we can process any necessary transitions before the inspection. Necessary transitions. That's what we called it. Not euthanasia. Not putting down. Transitioning. As if there were somewhere else these dogs were going instead of nowhere at all. Jacky's on the list, I said. Not a question. First page. Red priority. She stamped a form with more force than necessary. No behavioral improvement. 3 failed adoptions. No rescue interest. He meets all the criteria. He's not aggressive. I know, Louise. She looked up, and for a moment the professional mask cracked. I know, but we have 11 dogs on the wait list. 2 of them won't survive another week in the environment they're in now. And I have to choose between a dog who won't engage with humans and dogs who are dying too. She wasn't wrong. That was the worst part. She wasn't wrong. I found Sharon in her office, surrounded by color-coded files that represented lives reduced to data points. Red files. Behavioral concerns, failed adoptions, long-term residents with declining prospects. Yellow files. Medical cases, pending evaluations, uncertain outcomes. Green files. High adoption potential already matched with fosters, success stories in progress. Jacky's file sat on top of the red pile. I went to his intake location, I said from the doorway. Sharon looked up, surprised. You went to Riverside? Unit 312, where his owner died. I stepped inside and closed the door. I talked to a neighbor, found out about Caleb, the man who had Jacky for 3 years. He slept against that wall every night. Jacky slept beside him. That's what he's doing in the kennel. He's not dissociating. He's not broken. He's continuing a routine that kept him connected to someone for 3 years. Sharon set down her pen. Louise. He's not staring at nothing. He's maintaining a relationship with someone who's gone. Dr. Vance confirmed it. His behavior is purposeful, controlled. He's not a lost cause. He's grieving in the only way he knows how. I read Dr. Vance's report. Sharon's voice was gentle but firm. And you're right, Jacky isn't broken. But that doesn't change the fact that 3 families tried to live with him and couldn't. It doesn't change the fact that he won't eat unless food is placed directly in front of his face. Won't interact. Won't adjust to a new environment. Because he's still attached to his old one. Exactly. She leaned forward. And we can't change that. We can't bring Caleb back. We can't recreate the apartment. We can't undo 3 years of bonding. So what do we do, Louise? Keep him here indefinitely while he stares at a wall? Take up space that could save a puppy who has their whole life ahead of them? The question hung between us like an accusation. He deserves time. He's had 64 days. How much more time does he need? Sharon's voice cracked slightly. I'm not the villain here. I'm trying to do the most good with limited resources. And every day I choose Jacky is a day I can't choose someone else. I spent my lunch break in the break room, staring at my phone. The county clerk's office website had a deaths and estates section. I searched for Caleb's full name, Caleb Morrison, according to the elderly neighbor, and found a basic record. Caleb James Morrison, born March 14, 1967, died September 30, 2024. No surviving relatives listed. Estate status unclaimed. No funeral. No obituary. No next of kin to notify. Just a carpenter who'd lost his hand, then his house, then his future, and finally his life in a fire-damaged apartment with only a dog to witness his exit. I thought about the worn spot on the wall where Caleb's head had rested for 3 years. The way Jacky had stayed on that bed for 2 days after Caleb died, waiting for him to wake up. I thought about the families who tried to adopt Jacky and brought him back because he wouldn't perform happiness for them, because he was too busy being faithful to someone else. Love, misunderstood, was about to become a death sentence. I cornered Maya after her shift ended. What would it take to get Jacky off the red list? She looked at me like I'd asked her to reverse gravity. Louise, seriously, what would it take? Behavioral improvement? Adoption interest? Foster placement? Any of those. But we don't have any of those. She softened. Look, I get it. I really do. Jacky's story is heartbreaking. But heartbreaking doesn't change the math. We're over capacity. The state inspector comes Tuesday. If we don't make room, the entire shelter gets flagged. And if we get flagged, we lose funding. And if we lose funding, we can't help anyone. So one dog dies so the system can keep running. One dog with no adoption prospects dies so 11 dogs with good prospects can live. Yes. She met my eyes. I hate it too, but that's the choice. That night I stayed late, long after the last visitors left, long after Maya locked the front doors, long after the barking settled into the quieter sounds of dogs trying to sleep in a place that would never feel like home. I walked to kennel 14. Jacky was in position. Same angle, same focus, same invisible vigil. I sat outside his gate and pulled out my notebook. Day 64. For pages of timings and observations and desperate attempts to make sense of grief that had outlived its object. I don't know how to help you, I said quietly. Jacky's ear twitched. 11:40 p.m. Right on schedule. Somewhere in that burned-out apartment, there might be something left. Something that still carried Caleb's scent. Something that could tell Jacky what words couldn't. He's gone. You don't have to wait anymore. You did your job. You can rest now. But even if I found it, would it help? Or would it just be another cruelty? Forcing Jacky to confront the finality of what he'd already survived once? I pulled out my phone and opened the county morgue website. Caleb Morrison had died 2 months ago. No next of kin meant his belongings would have been processed through the unclaimed property system. Most of it would have been disposed of. But personal effects, clothing, documents, small items, those sometimes stayed in storage for 90 days before final disposal. I checked the calendar. 63 days since Caleb's death. 27 days left before everything he'd owned disappeared completely. I stood up, decision crystallizing into action. Rules said I should let the review board make their choice. Responsibility said I was the only person standing between a loyal dog and a system that couldn't afford to understand him. Inaction wasn't neutral anymore. It was complicated. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I had 27 days to find what was left of Caleb Morrison. And less than 24 hours to figure out if love could be translated into something Jacky's body would finally understand as permission to let go. The county morgue was closed, but the property storage facility stayed open until midnight for law enforcement access. I wasn't law enforcement, but I had a volunteer ID badge from the shelter and enough desperation to make a convincing case. The clerk at the property desk was younger than I expected. Early 20s, nose ring, bored expression that suggested this was a paycheck, not a calling. I need to inquire about personal effects from a deceased individual, I said, trying to sound official. She didn't look up from her phone. Name: Caleb James Morrison. Died September 30th. She typed something into her computer, waited, and frowned. Unclaimed estate. No next of kin. I know. I'm trying to locate any personal items that might still be in storage. Now she looked at me. You family? No. I work with Ridgeway Animal Shelter. Mr. Morrison had a dog. The dog is struggling. I'm trying to find something that might help with the transition. It wasn't a lie, just a carefully constructed version of the truth. She studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. Policy says unclaimed effects get held for 90 days, then disposed of. We're at day 63, so technically it's still here. But I can't release anything without proper authorization. I'm not asking to take anything. I just need to know what's there. She sighed, clicked a few more keys. Morrison, Caleb James. Clothing items, personal effects recovered from the scene. Most of it was smoke damaged or unsalvageable. We kept what we could for identification purposes. She scrolled. Wallet, keys, one wristwatch non-functional, and, she paused. One flannel jacket, red and black pattern. That's it. My heart seized. The jacket. Is it still here? Should be. Like I said, 90-day hold. Can I see it? She looked at me like I'd asked to see evidence from a crime scene. Why? The dog, Jacky, slept next to Mr. Morrison every night for 3 years. If that jacket still has Mr. Morrison's scent, it might be the only thing that can help him understand. I trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. Understand that his person is gone? Understand that it's okay to stop waiting? The clerk's expression softened slightly. That's kind of intense. He's going to be euthanized tomorrow if nothing changes. She looked at her computer screen, then at me, then back at the screen. I'm not supposed to do this, she said quietly. She stood up. Wait here. She came back 10 minutes later carrying a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside, a flannel jacket, red and black plaid, worn soft with age. One pocket torn, collar frayed. The kind of jacket that had been worn so often it had shaped itself to the body of its owner. She held it up to the fluorescent light. It's smoke damaged, probably smells like hell, but it's intact. She looked at me. What exactly are you planning to do with this? Bring it to the dog. Let him process it. Let him. I searched for words. Let him say goodbye. You can't take this out of storage without authorization. I know. She set the bag on the counter between us. But if someone were to accidentally leave it unattended for, say, 20 minutes while they went on their legally mandated break, and if that someone came back and found it returned to its proper place in storage, she held my gaze. That would be a very unfortunate lapse in protocol. I'd probably get written up. I stared at her. 20 minutes, she repeated. Starting now. She walked away without looking back. I held the bag in my lap the entire drive back to the shelter, afraid to open it. Afraid of what it would smell like. Afraid it wouldn't smell like anything at all. But mostly afraid of what would happen when I gave it to Jacky. What if he didn't react? What if the scent was too faded, too contaminated by smoke and time and plastic storage? What if I was wrong about everything, about the wall, about the routine, about what Jacky needed? What if this was just another cruelty? Or worse, what if it worked? What if Jacky finally understood that Caleb was gone? And the understanding broke him completely. I sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes, holding the bag, before I could make myself get out of the car. The shelter was silent at 11:30 p.m. I let myself in through the back entrance, punching in the volunteer access code. The hallway lights were dimmed to their overnight setting, just enough illumination to navigate, not enough to disturb the sleeping dogs. Most of them were quiet. A few shifted in their kennels as I passed. One whimpered, another snored. Kennel 14 was still a photograph. Jacky sat in his position, body angled toward the wall, head tilted slightly downward. 11:40 p.m. His ears had already started their scheduled adjustment. I stood outside the gate, holding the plastic bag, and felt the weight of what I was about to do. This wasn't science. It wasn't protocol. Wasn't anything I could defend if Sharon found out. This was faith. Faith that a dog's grief deserved to be witnessed. That loyalty, even when it served no purpose, deserved to be honored. I unlocked the gate. I moved slowly, telegraphing every action. Jacky didn't turn, didn't acknowledge me. His focus remained fixed on the wall. I opened the plastic bag. The smell hit me immediately. Smoke and old cotton and something underneath that was harder to name. Not decay. Something more permanent. The scent of a body that had worn this jacket so often it had become part of it. Sweat and soap and wood shavings from carpentry work years ago. Coffee. Tobacco smoke. The accumulated evidence of a life lived in close quarters with fabric. I lifted the jacket out carefully. It was heavier than I expected. The fabric was stiff in places from smoke damage, soft in others from years of wear. The collar was folded in a specific way, the way it would have folded if someone had taken it off and laid it on a bed. I walked to the wall Jacky had been watching for 64 days. I thought about the apartment. The mattress pushed against the northwest corner. Caleb sleeps with his back to the wall, head resting against that worn spot 3 feet up. I placed the jacket against the wall, carefully, reverently, positioning it so the collar sat at exactly the height where Caleb's neck would have been, where his scent would have been strongest, where Jacky would have pressed his face every night for 3 years when he curled beside him. Then I stepped back and waited. Nothing happened. Jacky remained in position. Same posture, same angle, same unbroken focus on the wall. I stood there, barely breathing, watching for any sign, any micro-movement, any shift in attention. That would indicate he'd registered the change. Nothing. The minutes stretched out. 1, 2, 5. My chest tightened. Maybe the scent was too faded. Maybe I'd placed it wrong. Maybe I was asking Jacky to make a cognitive leap his brain couldn't process. Or maybe I just projected human meaning onto animal behavior, and this entire desperate plan was nothing more than my own need to fix something that couldn't be fixed. I looked at the jacket hanging against the wall, a ghost of a person Jacky had loved, and felt the fragile hope I'd been carrying start to collapse. Then, so slowly I almost missed it, Jacky's nose twitched. Once, twice. His right ear rotated 15 degrees off schedule. And for the first time in 64 days, Jacky turned his head away from the wall. The movement was infinitesimal at first. Just a shift in the angle of his muzzle, a few degrees, barely perceptible in the dim overhead light. His body remained locked in that rigid posture he'd maintained through adoption attempts and failed interventions and 64 nights of unwavering vigil. But his head turned, slowly, like a rusted mechanism finally yielding to pressure. His nostrils flared. Once, twice, processing information his brain hadn't received in 2 months. I pressed my back against the kennel wall and made myself as small as possible. This wasn't about me. Couldn't be about me. I was witnessing something private, the moment between a soul and its grief. Jacky's ears pivoted fully toward the jacket. His eyes, which had been locked on that blank space of wall for so long they seemed painted open, shifted focus. He saw the jacket, or rather, he recognized what the jacket meant. His legs trembled as he tried to stand. Not from weakness, from the physical cost of breaking a pattern his body had been holding for 64 days. Muscles that had learned to stay rigid now had to remember how to move, how to unbend, how to carry him forward instead of keeping him locked in place. He got his front legs under him first, pushed himself up awkwardly, rear legs shaking with the effort. His head swayed slightly. Disorientation, maybe, or just the shock of changing position after so long. He stood fully upright for 3 seconds. Then his legs buckled, and he sat back down hard. But his eyes never left the jacket. He tried again. This time his legs held. He swayed, found his balance, and took one hesitant step forward. Then another. His gait was stiff, mechanical, like someone relearning how to walk after surgery. Each step required conscious effort. Lift paw, extend, place, shift weight, repeat. He moved toward the wall in slow motion, closing the 6 feet between his blanket and the jacket with the careful deliberation of someone approaching something sacred, or something dangerous, or both. When he was 2 feet away, he stopped. His whole body tensed, ears forward, nostrils working overtime, every sense focused on the red and black flannel hanging against the gray concrete. I held my breath. Jacky's nose touched the collar first. Just a brief contact, testing, verifying. His head jerked back immediately, as if he'd been shocked. He stood there, frozen, staring at the jacket from 2 feet away. Then he stepped forward again. This time he pressed his face fully into the fabric. into the collar where Caleb's neck would have been, into the shoulder where his scent would have pooled every night, into the worn softness that carried 2 months of memory compressed into cotton and smoke damage. His legs started shaking again, not from exertion, from something breaking open inside him. The sound came first, low, guttural, a noise I'd never heard a dog make. Too deep for a whimper, too raw for a whine. It rose from somewhere in his chest, built in his throat, and escaped as something between a moan and a cry. Not pain, recognition. His front legs gave out and he collapsed against the wall, the jacket pressed between his body and the concrete. His paws scrabbled against the fabric like he was trying to hold onto it, or hold onto what it represented. The sound got louder. It wasn't a howl. Howls are performative, designed to communicate across distance, to summon pack members, to declare territory. This was private, visceral, the kind of grief that has no audience because it has no language. Jacky's whole body shook with it. I slid down the wall I'd been pressed against and sat on the cold concrete floor, my hands pressed over my mouth. I'd expected recognition, maybe some sign that the scent registered. A moment of acknowledgement followed by acceptance. I hadn't expected this. Jacky circled the jacket once, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He pressed his face into it from a different angle, then pulled back, then pressed in again. Like he was searching for something he knew wasn't there but couldn't stop looking for anyway. He pawed at the jacket, dragging it partially down the wall. Then he climbed on top of it. Not the way a dog claims a toy or a comfortable spot. The way someone drapes themselves over a casket. Full body contact. Face buried in the fabric. Front legs wrapped around it as far as they would reach. And he sobbed. I didn't know dogs could sob. Not like this. His ribcage heaved. His breathing came in ragged, uneven gasps. The sounds coming from him were almost human, the kind of crying that comes from a place deeper than words, older than language. He was mourning. Not the way people think dogs mourn, with confusion or listlessness or gradual adjustment. This was active grief, conscious grief, the kind that requires you to fully understand what you've lost before you can release it. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Long enough for the overnight silence to deepen into the pre-dawn stillness that feels like the world holding its breath. Jacky's sobs eventually quieted into softer sounds. Whimpers, exhales that caught in his throat. The physical exhaustion that follows emotional collapse. He shifted position slightly, rearranging his body over the jacket. Getting comfortable in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be comfortable in 2 months. His eyes were still open, but the rigid focus was gone. The vigilance had dissolved. He looked tired, emptied. He laid his head down on the bunched fabric where Caleb's shoulder would have been and closed his eyes. Not sleeping. Rest. The kind of rest that's only possible when you're no longer holding vigil. When you're no longer waiting for someone to wake up. When you've finally given yourself permission to stop working. I stayed until dawn. Not because Jacky needed me. He didn't even know I was there. But because bearing witness felt like the only thing I could offer. The only way to honor what had just happened. Around 5:30 a.m., Jacky stirred. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused. He lifted his head, looked at the jacket beneath him, and something in his expression shifted. Not understanding exactly. Acceptance. He stood up carefully, his movements still stiff but no longer mechanical. He looked at the jacket, then at the wall, then back at the jacket. Then he turned and looked at me for the first time since I'd entered the kennel. His eyes were clear, present. The 1,000-yard stare was gone. He took 2 steps toward me, stopped, and sat down. Not in his vigil position. Just sitting. The way a dog sits when they're waiting for instruction. When they're ready to listen. When they're ready to move forward. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Could barely breathe through the tightness in my chest. Jacky had spent 64 days keeping watch over someone who was gone. And in one night, he'd finally allowed himself to say goodbye. Not because he'd forgotten Caleb, but because he'd remembered him completely. The morning shift would start in an hour. The review board meeting was at 2 p.m. I stood up slowly, my joints protesting after hours on the concrete floor. Jacky watched me, his expression calm. Waiting. I picked up the jacket carefully, folded it the way it had been folded before, and placed it in the back corner of his kennel. Not on the wall, not as a shrine, just present, available, a bridge between what had been and what could be. Then I opened the kennel gate and left it open. Jacky looked at the opening, at me, at the jacket, and chose to stay. Not because he was frozen, because he wasn't ready yet. I closed the gate gently and walked out of Kennel 14 with tears streaming down my face and my phone in my hand, already composing the email to Sharon. Subject: Jacky, case #R 3847, behavioral update. He moved. If you're crying right now, you're not alone. And if Jacky's story just completely destroyed you in the best way, do something beautiful. Hit subscribe, share this video with one person who needs to see that loyalty still exists in this world, and comment your location below. My fiancé said we'd never reach 1,000 subscribers telling stories like this. We're at 923. We need 77 more people to believe that love, even a dog's love, matters. Are you one of them? Now let me tell you how Jacky learned to live again. I sent the email at 6:47 a.m. and waited. The morning light was different when it came through the shelter windows that day. Softer, maybe. Or maybe I was just different. Hollowed out in the way you feel after crying so hard there's nothing left inside you but clarity. Sharon responded at 7:15. Come to my office when you get in. She was standing at her window when I arrived, looking out at the parking lot where the early morning dog walkers were starting to gather. Tell me what happened, she said without turning around. So I did. I told her about Riverside Boulevard, about Unit 312 and the mattress outline and the neighbor who remembered Caleb, about the county property storage and the 20 minutes that weren't supposed to happen, about the jacket and the wall and the sound Jacky made when he finally understood what he'd been waiting for wasn't coming back. When I finished, Sharon was quiet for a long time. You broke protocol, she said finally. I know. You removed evidence from county storage without authorization. I returned it. You conducted an unauthorized behavioral intervention on a dog scheduled for review. Yes. She turned to face me. Her expression was unreadable. You also documented the most profound case of animal grief I've heard in 20 years of shelter work. I didn't know what to say to that. Sharon sat down at her desk and pulled up Jacky's file on her computer. The review board still meets at 2 p.m., but I'm recommending a 30-day foster trial. With you. She looked at me. Unless you have objections. My throat tightened. I don't have objections. Good. Because that dog just told us he's ready to try. And you're the only person who's been listening. The adoption paperwork took 40 minutes. Not because it was complicated. Because I kept having to stop and wipe my eyes so I could read the forms. Jacky was still in Kennel 14 when I came to get him. The jacket was in the corner where I'd left it. He was sitting, not in his vigil position, just sitting near the gate, watching the morning activity in the hallway with an expression that looked almost curious. When he saw me, his tail lifted slightly. Not a wag. Not yet. But an acknowledgement. I opened the gate and crouched down. You ready? He stood up slowly, walked to where the jacket lay, and picked it up carefully in his mouth. Then he walked toward me and stopped, waiting. I clipped the leash to his collar, the first time he'd worn one in 2 months without being forcibly dragged somewhere, and we walked out of Kennel 14 together. Maya was at the front desk. She looked up when we passed, saw Jacky carrying the jacket, and pressed her hand over her mouth. Take care of him, she whispered. I will. The first week was hard. Not because Jacky was difficult, because adjustment isn't linear, and grief doesn't follow a schedule. He explored my apartment carefully, methodically, like someone cataloging a new space. He found the corner of my bedroom that aligned with the northwestern wall of his kennel and sat there for 3 hours the first night. But he didn't stare. He sat, watchful but not vigilant, present but not consumed. The jacket stayed with him. He carried it from room to room the first few days, slept with it under his head. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and find him curled around it in the living room, breathing slowly, at peace. Other times I'd find him sitting by the window, the jacket untouched across the room, watching birds. He was learning that grief and living weren't mutually exclusive. Eating took patience. The first morning, I put his food bowl on the floor and waited. He looked at it, looked at me, didn't move. So I slid it closer to him the way I'd done at the shelter. He ate 12 pieces. Stopped. Looked up. "It's okay," I said. "You can eat." The next morning, he ate without me moving the bowl. The morning after that, he walked to it on his own. Small victories. Quiet progress. By the end of the second week, he'd started following me through the apartment. Not anxiously, just tracking. Learning my routines the way he'd learned Caleb's. Morning coffee. Afternoon work at the kitchen table. Evening walks around the block. He was a different kind of devotee now. Less vigil, more companionship. 3 weeks in, I drove him back to Riverside Boulevard. Not because I thought he needed it, because I wanted to give him the choice. We parked across from the chain link fence. The building looked the same. Condemned, burned out, forgotten. I opened the car door and waited to see what he'd do. Jacky stood up, looked at the building and went very still. But not frozen, not locked, just remembering. After a minute he turned and looked at me, then back at the building, then at me again. "You want to go closer?" He stepped out of the car. We walked to the fence together. I didn't try to go through the gap, just stood there, letting him see the place where his life with Caleb had ended. Jacky sat down, his shoulder pressed against my leg, and stared at the third-floor windows for a long time. I didn't rush him, didn't try to interpret what he was feeling, just stood there with him, bearing witness the way I'd learned to do. Finally, he stood up, pressed his nose against the chain link once, and turned back toward the car. Not running away, choosing to leave. We've been back 3 times since then. Once a month like clockwork. Each visit is shorter than the last. Each time, Jacky's posture is a little more relaxed. A little less like he's saying goodbye and a little more like he's checking in. The jacket lives on a shelf in my bedroom now. He doesn't carry it anymore, but sometimes I catch him sleeping beneath it, the flannel draped across his back like a blanket. He started wagging his tail. Not constantly, Jacky's not that kind of dog. But when I come home, when I pull out the leash for a walk, when I sit on the couch and pat the cushion beside me, he started choosing connections. Not instead of Caleb. Alongside him. People ask me sometimes if Jacky's normal now. I tell them he was never not normal. He was just loving someone in the only way he knew how. And now he's learning there are other ways. Other people. Other forms of devotion that don't require you to stop moving through the world. Last week, I took him to the shelter to visit. Maya brought him a treat, and he took it from her hand gently, his tail wagging. We walked past Kennel 14. Someone had written Jacky's Corner on a piece of tape stuck to the wall outside. Inside, a new dog was curled on the same blanket where Jacky used to keep his vigil. Jacky looked at the kennel, then at me. Then I kept walking. Not because he'd forgotten, because he'd integrated what happened there into something he could carry without it carrying him. Tonight, Jacky is asleep on the couch beside me, his head resting on my thigh, the flannel jacket folded on the shelf across the room. Every so often, his paws twitch in his sleep. Dreams, maybe, or just the body's memory of motion. At 3 a.m., he'll probably shift position. An old habit from the routine he kept for 3 years with someone else. But when he wakes up, he'll see me. and he'll choose to stay. Not because he's forgotten Caleb. Because love doesn't disappear when the person you love does. It doesn't vanish, doesn't evaporate, doesn't become less real just because its object is gone. It learns how to live again. It finds new people to trust, new routines to build, new moments worth waking up for. Jacky taught me that grief and devotion aren't endpoints. They're foundations. And the most loyal heart isn't the one that stops when love ends. It's the one that keeps beating, keeps watching, keeps caring, keeps choosing connection. Even when the person it loved most is only a memory and a scent on an old flannel jacket. Jacky was never staring at a wall. He was keeping watch over a love that refused to die. And now, finally, he's learned that the best way to honor it is to keep living. So, my fiancé owes me dinner, because you just helped this channel prove that humanity still shows up for stories that matter. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're building a community that believes loyalty, grief, and love deserve to be witnessed. Hit that subscribe button, drop a comment with your country or city so I can see how far Jacky's story traveled, and share this with someone who needs to remember that broken things can heal. Jacky learned how to stay. Will you? See you in the next story. Paw Prints, Yellow Heart.